This is the C-Shift Station 141 line of duty death discussion that we received our assignment from our great training chief. So we could talk about all this morbid kind of stuff and find out what not to do to each other or what not to do when we're doing our job. So let's move on. All right, forcible entry. We're going to talk about a couple things before we get in the case. When we're on a fire, whether it's the truck crew or the engine crew, doesn't matter which, whoever gets to the door first. How many people does it take to force a door? Terry?
Usually it's a team.
Okay, a couple, right? A couple, two. All right. If you're on the nozzle, Joe, you and Chris, okay, where do you position yourself getting ready to go in the door as they force the door?
To the side.
To the side and down low, right? Because we are worried about hazards coming out the door, combustion, smoke, nasty stuff, right? All that kind of stuff, right? What about on an EMS run? I know our crew personally has forced a couple doors, at least two in the last couple of months. One with the Hyper-Ram, one with Tony's brute force and a Halligan bar, okay? But do we give the same consideration to forcing that EMS door that we give to forcing the fire door? Because I know that when Dilly and I forced the back door of the apartment with the Hyper-Ram, everybody was standing right behind us. And I can tell you that when Tony took the door down in Cedar Bend, this is a case where their dispatch receives a call at basically 7:30 saying that Mr. Williams can't reach his diabetic brother, Mr. Lumpkin.
Engine 142, medic 142,
Good talk, Chris.
Bye, guys.
Can you tell us the ending before the...
No spoiler alert, sorry.
Medic 142, 013, 017, East County Road 100 North, room 127, 11:02 hours, clock of 10,400, rated crossing.
So basically what this was a welfare check, okay? How many times do we get a third-party call for a sick person, whatever, okay? We get a third-party call saying, lately it's third-party for an overdose, that kind of stuff going on, you know. I think they're overdosing because we can't get a hold of them and so on and so forth. So this was a third-party call. The engine responded, 6 volunteer members, they were out playing basketball in the community. The guy in charge was Firefighter Fitch, then there was Riley driving, Swain, so on and so forth. And the ambulance that responded with them was ambulance 823. 2 firefighters, they responded from quarters, and they arrived, whoops, hold on, sorry. So in 1946 they get there. They park on the Alpha Delta corner, everybody gets out, they make contact with Mr. Williams, the caller, in the driveway. The brother is in the driveway waiting for him, saying, I can't get a hold of my brother. And he says he called because, whoop, hold on, damn it, this thing. Okay, so this is the house. This is the house they responded to. So the engine parked over here. Okay, well, I'm going back, sorry. All right, so Mr. Williams says his brother's having a medical emergency. That's what he believes. He needs assistance because he's trying to contact him several times. And lately, he's been having some medical issues. He's a brittle diabetic. He got sent home yesterday sick, and he can't get in the house. So he's really, really emotionally worked up. He's agitated that he really needs help. We ever come into those family members? Right? And how does that affect you? That's the thing. Do you get caught up in it? Do you try to calm them down? Do we move on? Okay, so rescue engine 827 starts knocking on the door. Starts yelling fire department. They start knocking on the front door windows. One member of the department looks down the Delta side. Everybody else is on the Alpha side. Okay, and then they come to the front door, which was a storm door, a heavy storm door, and the wooden door. And then they were trying to get this forced open to took them several attempts, loud attempts, to get the storm door open. Okay? Come on.
It went once.
Did it go? Man. This is crazy. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, all right, so now the ambulance gets on the scene. They join the other 5 people up front on the porch, and Mr. Williams is becoming even more agitated. They're still all yelling fire department, banging on the door, banging on the door. I'm just going to do it from here. All right, so they actually get through the storm door now. Firefighter Swain, Fitch, and O'Brien attempt to force the wooden door. 3 people to force the wooden door. Again, Mr. Williams is becoming even more agitated, so they decide to shock the door. Their definition of shock the door is this is a paneled door, paneled entry door. What their idea of shock the door is, they busted out the panels. That's their idea of shocking the door. So, they took out the lower right panel and it falls into the residence. Firefighter Swain drops to one knee, reaches in, and unlocks the deadbolt. Swain, Fitch, and O'Brien are side by side in front of the door. Livingston, Ward, and Williams are staggered behind them on the porch. The 2 guys assigned to the medic were on the front steps below them. I'll show you a picture of the porch here in a second. So, this is where they all were. Right here. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people all in front of the door when they took that door. Okay, that's what the door actually looks like. So imagine having 8 people standing on this basically stoop. Okay? As you might have seen briefly in the picture of the house, it was an elevated yard. So they had to walk up from the driveway. It was basically a tri-level. They had to walk up from the driveway up the stairs and up to here. So this is where 8 people are standing when they take the door. And you can see the splinters here where they took the bottom panel. Okay, so the door swings open. Mr. Williams pushes his way through. He gets past everybody. Firefighter Swain and Mr. Williams go in the door at the same time. And as the door swings open, 5 shots ring out from the inside. Because the victim was laying on the floor with a small caliber .380 and thought somebody was breaking into his house. Took 5 shots just blindly at the front door. So, Firefighter Swain was struck in the abdomen. He turned, was struck twice more in the lower back, and once in the buttocks. Mr. Williams, the guy's brother, was struck in the lower jaw and collapsed in the doorway. Firefighter paramedic Ulmschneider turned to flee. He was struck in the chest as he was running towards the ambulance. 5 shots fired, 5 shots landed. Think about that small grouping of people and 5 shots being taken at him. So Fitch jumped the handrail, ran to the ambulance. Ward exited the porch down the stairs and hid behind a parked car. O'Brien fled to the inside of the ambulance. Livingston was knocked down by everybody else running away, sustained injuries to the neck and jaw, and then went across the street with Mr. Williams to another house, to a neighbor's. Firefighter Schoonoven exited to the passenger side of the ambulance. So he took cover on the passenger side of the ambulance. So this is what it looks like. This is where they all went. This is how they scattered. There was a car here, the engine was here, the medic was here. So you can see they went down the driveway, down the yard, and hid on the other side of the ambulance. At 1950, several radio transmissions were sent saying shots fired, members down. When Ulmschneider reached the far side of the ambulance, He asked O'Brien in Schoonhoven if he had been shot. He didn't realize he had been shot. He was asked if he had been shot. Then he collapsed, and they loaded him into the ambulance. At this point, he was conscious, but not responding to him. 1954 hours. They rendered aid to their brother en route to South Maryland Hospital. Fitch drove. They asked for an ALS intercept, but the closest one was 10 minutes away. So they made the decision to give it a diesel bolus and get to the hospital and continue BLS care. Their BLS care consisted of a life pack with pads, showing a 3-lead, a pulse ox. They tried to put an OP in him without success. They continued to bag him, and they had to do some suction. 27 hours, they got to the hospital. Ulmschneider was pronounced dead at 20:38. One single gunshot from a .380 entered his body mid-axillary, just above his right nipple, crossed across his chest, and lodged in his left bicep. This shooting left behind his wife and his 2-year-old daughter. They had been married just a couple of years. That's him. Now, for the rest of the crew, Firefighter Swain, self-extricated from the porch, rolled down the driveway. They all got into the cab of engine 823 at a little bit after 8. They met another ambulance that had been dispatched because of the shooting, and he was taken to a helicopter and then airlifted to Baltimore. Livingston and Riley were just treated for their injuries. Mr. Williams, if you look at the report, 30 minutes later, he was across the street, remember, at the neighbor's house? 30 minutes later, they came in contact with him and transported him for his gunshot to his chin. They found him 30 minutes later. Okay, so let's talk about the people involved in their experience. Firefighter Fitch had 9 months on the job. Riley had 14 and a half. Swain had 9 months. Ward had 2 years, 2 months. O'Brien, 2 years and 8 months. And Livingston had 3 years. Who did I say was in the officer's seat? Fitch, right? How much experience does Fitch have?
9 months.
9 months. Okay? 9 months, and he's in the front seat of an engine with 4 other people. 5 other people, excuse me. So there's 6 people on this engine. Now Riley was driving. He had 14 and a half years experience. Okay? So 9 months was the guy who was in charge of the scene. Whoops, sorry. Did it again. Now on the ambulance, Schoonhoven had 2 years and 2 months, and the guy who paid the price had 13 years and 1 month on the job. 13 years and 1 month. Now I don't know if anybody around here knows much about Prince George County, but if you spend much time out east, like at the Fire Academy or something like that, you hear a whole lot about this department. It's a county department in Maryland. It has 48 stations and 7 battalions. It's a combination department. Has 1,100 volunteers, 720 paid, and 80 support staff. Their bragging rights are they can equal, they can match or better any paid department around them with their volunteer status. They have volunteer stations and paid stations. They have 3 fireboats. They have 54 ambulances, 38 of them are BLS, 16 ALS. They have 71 engines, 22 trucks, 11 squads. Now the two stations, 827 does approximately 7,100 runs a year. Not a slow station. Not a slow station. And 88 and 823 does almost 7,700 runs a year. So it's not like these guys get a run every other day or every 3 days like some small volunteer department. They shouldn't know what they're doing. Excuse me. Population where they were, approximately 8,000. Median income, about 71,000. Look at the median house cost. $250,000. This is not a rundown neighborhood where a shooting happened. This happened in an upper middle class neighborhood on a medical emergency. How many upper class medical emergencies to those kinds of neighborhoods do we respond to? I was having a conversation with just somebody the other day, and they said, oh, well, we were told to stage for law enforcement, but we thought there wasn't somebody breathing, so we went on in. Right decision, wrong decision? I don't know, I'm not going to quarterback it, but could we pay the price for it? Okay, here's the, I'm sorry, I did it again. Dang, man. Here's the entryway. He was laying right around the corner. And then this is the doorway they went into. As you see, it's a narrow hallway, and then goes to the left and goes to the right, like it's a T entry. So everybody was grouped right in here, and that's where they got shot right there. This is from pictures to the outside. You can see, well, the markers where people were shot. But as you look down, that's the entrance looking out. You see that it took the lower right-hand panel there. All right, so what went wrong? How could this have been prevented? What do we do now to prevent this from happening? And what else can we do to prevent it? So what went wrong? According to the report, the police weren't on the scene at the time the door was forced. Firefighter identification and time of evening. Okay, here's a situation we don't have because we're all in the same uniform. These guys were not in the same uniform. Some of them were maybe even in civilian clothes. Lack of communication, presence of firearms in the residence, that's a ding on dispatch. I don't know if that information is even collected. Resident did not acknowledge the multiple attempts by the fire department to contact him verbally and knocking on the front door. So they don't, at that point, do you even know he's unconscious or what the deal is? This is all in the report. Firefighters not wearing ballistic vests or personal protective equipment. They were hard to be identified, so I guess for the PPE, but they were doing a study after this about ballistic vests. How many times have you heard about ballistic vests lately? Right, I think Pike's got them now for the paramedics, I think. There's pros and cons. Okay, positioning of the personnel during forcible entry. How many people were in front of that door? 8. Yeah, all of them. Terry says all of them. Yeah, they were all right there in a row. Okay, so just look at that door right there and imagine we're all in this 3-foot space in a row. It's almost like bowling pins. You know what I mean? Something's going to get knocked over. Rushing into the residence immediately after forcing the door. Just because the brother blew by them, does that mean somebody needed to go immediately with them? I don't even think they checked their surroundings before they went in the door. So, and the emotional influence of the brother. Got them all worked up, and in the door they went. So, how could it have been prevented? This is the part where you talk. Ideas.
Check for other egresses.
Okay, so one of the things that they talked about was no 360 being done. So there was,
Look through windows.
look to see if there was an alternate point.
See somebody laying on the floor.
Okay, yeah, where's the position of the victim? Can you find them? Whatever. Okay, what else?
Knock the brother out.
Knock the brother out. Well, maybe have a couple people contain him, right? Now remember, this started out as a simple welfare check.
Maybe questioning more about the guy's medical history too, or is he, I mean, this has happened before, you know, those kind of things.
What did the report say about the welfare check brother? Was he, what did he end up having? Did he not understand who it was? Was he delirious? Was he?
Oh, he had been sick for the last 3 days, and he was a diabetic, so he wasn't eating. He was, yeah, in the very beginning, that's what his brother says. He's a brittle diabetic. He's been sick for the last few days. He even got sent home from yesterday. He got sent home from work yesterday, and I tried to reach him several times today. Haven't been able to get a hold of him. I came over to the house, couldn't get in the house because everything's locked.
That's what it was when they got to him.
That's what, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, his sugar was low. He was totally confused. He was unconscious. He was extremely remorseful after he got conscious of what happened. I mean, obviously, by no means was it, malicious intent, but yeah, it's all about him being out of, and thinking somebody was breaking into his house. So what do we do now to prevent this from happening? Do we do anything? Or do we do the same thing?
Stand to the side, enforcing,
Okay?
nobody in front of the door.
Is that how we do it now?
Nope. But that's how.
Because think about the door that you took the other night.
But that's how we can prevent it.
Yeah.
As many people, you may not prevent getting shot.
Well, that's true. I mean, but we have less people at risk.
Right. That's why I said as many people.
Yeah.
Go by unit number, they go in first.
We should joke.
That's kind of the same thing. We just answered that.
The lower the unit, we did.
All right. 30 minutes of line of duty death discussion. Any closing thoughts?
Think
My-
about your surroundings.
My closing thought is, what do we do every day? What do we do every day? EMS runs are what percentage of our job?
About 85.
85, 90%, right? We going on fire every day? No. Do we force a door every day? Think about those low frequency, high risk things. We don't even think about it when we force a door. We do when there's something potentially burning on the other side, because it might hurt us, right? But one thing that we do that they don't, and they started doing this, is now for us today, welfare checks are done by who?
Please.
Police, and then if they need us, they call us, okay? That's one category, but think about all those third-party calls that we get for sick people, we get for overdose people, possibly injured people, all those kinds of things, and elderly people. A lot of those times, that's a third-party call for an elderly person, a mom, an aunt, or something like that. How often do we find people who are a little off in their mentation, maybe because of medication mixes? Not even on purpose, just all the drugs they take, all the medications they take, even though they're prescribed. So be careful. I mean, take that, anytime you have to force a door, give yourself a second thought, or look around you, because I can tell you that when Dilly and I did it, everybody was standing right behind us. Luckily, we could see the patient lying on the floor and he was yelling for help. But that doesn't mean he wasn't laying on a gun. So, anything else? Thanks for your time, thanks for your attention.